And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Network. Here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. On the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. And of course the mothership at CoalitionRadio.us. A busy show tonight. Just a week after our landmark show, talking about the assassination, if you will, in Iran. We bring it back home locally for the next hour and a half or so. Joining me live for the very first time is someone that, well, if you live in Warwick, Rhode Island, you know who he is. If you are a member of any one of a number of state unions, state employee associations, you certainly know who he is. I have had the pleasure of listening to his expertise via the radio airwaves now for probably going on 10 plus years. He started his, if you will, overt political life as a city council person in the city of Warwick, Rhode Island. He lasted one term, possibly because of the incredible degree of honesty with which he conducted himself in regard to fiscal affairs. Locally, he works for a very large corporation in planning and capital assets and accounting, and so he's got that strange tick that only a few Rhode Islanders can really claim. He knows what he's talking about. And it's with great pleasure I introduce to the Coalition audience, sadly for the first time, this should have happened years ago, Bob Cushman. Bob, welcome to the Coalition.
Nice to be here.
All right, buddy. If you listen to Dan York on WPRO as I do, you'll hear Mr. Cushman, you'll hear Mr. Cody, and some guy who ran for governor, Ken Block, I think is his name. Mm-hmm. Good guy. You'll hear them talk and opine routinely on what has been in the works for nearly a generation now. And my words, not my guess, I'll point to it as the up-and-coming fiscal collapse of the city of Warwick. Now, if you've listened to myself or other folks over the years, you'll know that at one point in time I actually rooted for the demise of cities like Providence and the state of Rhode Island because to a certain degree, even today, years later, I remain convinced that sadly, and I actually mean that sadly, because it's a profound sadness, that comes the recognition that until we hit rock bottom, absolutely rock bottom, much like someone who is got a dependency, a chemical dependency, someone who's got some type of behavior for which they seem to have no control. Until that point is reached, then Rhode Island seems incapable of fixing itself. I'd like to point out that where I live, merely hundreds of yards from the border of Massachusetts, where I can see better schools, working utilities, paved roads, also exists arguably one of the hottest economies on the planet. I would also argue that whatever successes we've had job-wise here in the state of Rhode Island, and particularly in northern Rhode Island, are largely due to overflow and or direct employment by folks in Rhode Island, as I do every day, gather my few meager belongings and traveling north to Massachusetts to do the work that people from Massachusetts, well, won't do. It is incomprehensible at this point that given all that Rhode Island has to offer, wonderful people, coastline, all the usual stuff you hear about, a great place to live, a great place to eat, proximity to New York City and Boston, by New England standards, affordable cost of living, and I say that carefully and with respect, that we should be in the situation we find ourselves now. So in a handful of towns you've had, and unfortunately only a handful of towns, you've had folks who are citizens of those towns, committed activists, who have, in some cases, Mr. Cushman being one of them, arguably spent a significant part of his adult life trying, seemingly times chasing windmills, other times with success, trying to educate the people of both Rhode Island and most importantly in his case, the people of Warwick, as to the emergency they face, how they got there, why they're there now, and as importantly, specifically what they have to do to right the ship, as it will. I promise that I'll try to be the last cliche I use tonight because there are so many that apply. So in meeting you for the first time tonight, incredibly enough, despite the fact that we hover in the same circles, first of all, I have to congratulate you on your commitment to your city. Despite a level of adversity that many people would quell at, you've been threatened, you've had your employer threatened, You had scurrilous charges invented on your behalf. You did not win re-election despite arguably taking a very, very high road, not only in your professional approach to the office, but also in your interaction with other people who are far less professional. This is the type of commitment we need, and despite that, despite all the challenges and the losses, you continue to try and do the right thing. It's, as someone who tries to work at that level, and sometimes succeeds, more often than not fails, I find it astonishing that you're able to maintain the maturity, the perspective, and the work ethic at what you do. And I
appreciate that.
All I can say as someone who's been on the sidelines with Warwick for a number of years, because I don't live there, is to say thank you, because as tough as things are now, and they are tough, we're not going to sugarcoat this hour, right? They are in brutal circumstances. I can't imagine what it would be like if you weren't there.
Well, you know what? Well, first, thanks for inviting me for coming on. You know, I think this becomes sometimes a very emotional issue when you talk about these things, and you know, people tend to look at it from like a single lens where you're kind of like attacking and things like that. You know, some of the union people and things like that. And that's the furthest thing from my mind that, you know, I want people to think about. I think what people need to think about is that we got to look at the overall pictures. We got to kind of stop. We got to take the blinders off. And you know, when we talk about the city of Warwick, you know, I've been kind of doing this for about 20 years right now. And, you know, I was on a school committee from 2003 to 2006. And you know, one of the things that I saw from my experience on the school committee was the fact that you know, you could see the legacy costs. When I talk about legacy costs, I'm talking about, you know, pensions and healthcare and benefits and things like that, and how they were going to get to a point where it was going to be unsustainable in terms of the funding that we need to, you know, keep these programs going, and at the detriment of everything else in the city. And you know, when I go and I talk and I go to the city council meetings and things like that, you know, there's a lot of times there's other residents and things like that. And I talk to, you know, there's a perfect example. There's an elderly gentleman, I know, he's like 78 years old. He's a veteran, I believe it's of the Korean War. And, you know, just this past tax year, his property taxes went up $600 on his home. You know, he's on a fixed income, and it's getting to a point, the guy was in tears to me, and he's saying, Bob, I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to have to move out of my house. And, you know, when you look at, you know, people like him, you know, some of the older people in the community, and you look at, you know, why are our taxes going up? This is what I want to talk about a little bit more, you know, when we start getting into this. And then we talk about, well, let's go back, like, you know, just 6 months ago, when the kids stormed this city council, because, you know, no sports programs. You know, so why are all these things happening? You know, and you know, I want to dive a little bit into that and get into this. And you know, why are our taxes constantly going up? But at the same time, our roads are terrible. Our school buildings are terrible. You know what I'm saying? So there's got to be an answer to that, and it's pretty clear what's going on, and it's pretty clear what direction we need to take. You know, but we're mixing politics into that, and when you start mixing politics into that, you know, it's sometimes it's not clear to the certain politicians because they're looking at sometimes something from their own self-interest, and it's too bad.
Right.
So,
well, let's start in a sense. Let's do a little snapshot, and then we'll go back to the beginning.
okay.
How bad is it?
Well, so, you know, I've taken my notes over here. So what I've been doing is I've been keeping track of the city finances for almost 15 years now. And, you know, like I said, I was on the school committee from, you know, 2003 to 2006, one term on the city council. And, you know, one of the things that I was starting to look at, you look at what the experts were telling us in terms of you know, the escalating costs of pensions and healthcare. So, you know, what I've been doing is let's just look at the numbers now. We'll look at the numbers, and when we look at the 2004 Warwick City budget, and I'm just going to talk, 19% of the budget was used to pay for retirement employee costs. That's
right.
Pensions and healthcare. Now we go 15 years later, 2019 budget, we're up to 30% of our budget. 30% of our budget. So, but what does that mean? So, you know, you throw these numbers out and it's hard for people to understand, well, what's the impact from going, let's say, to 19 to 30%? Well, in the last 15 years, we've given 61 million more tax dollars to the city side of the budget, right? And when we look at that, how did we go from 19% to 30%? 44% of that, or almost $7 million, was allocated towards pension and healthcare costs. So what does that mean? I like to talk about analogies. Let's say you're a small businessman, right? For every dollar you make in profits, 44 cents of that has to go to pay for an employee that provided services for you in the past that no longer works for you. 44 cents on the dollar. If you were a business and that's what you had to do, you probably would go out of business because it wouldn't be worth for you to stay in business. So what's happened? What's happened is we've spent more money on retired employee benefits and even active employee benefits in the city of Warwick. And then we talk about there's a little piece of the pie, everything else. What's been the impact of everything else? The impact's been, years ago, we used to have after-school programs for the kids that was funded by the city. We had senior service programs. We had programs for, underprivileged families that were in distress and things like that. Those are all gone. We used to spend millions of dollars on road repairs, and we went for a 10-year period of time where we were lucky if we spent $100,000. So when you drive through the roads in Warwick, when you go into the school buildings and everything else, you could see how much things are falling apart in the city because we're allocating all that cost to these benefit programs. But let's talk about it a little bit, because you know what? Hey, you got to pay health care, you got to pay pensions. That's fine. I totally understand that. But the question is, to what extent? So what I mean by that is, I did a study of the 2016 retirees, and there were 6 of them from the fire department. And I'm not always picking on the fire department either. There's the pensions for the police and the municipal employees that have the same situations. But what I looked at is 6 firefighters retired in 2016. Throughout their entire careers, they contributed $764,000 into the pension fund. Now these employees are getting, some of them are getting almost $100,000 a year in pensions. And one of the stipulations in the pension plan, and I don't want to get too technical about it, but it's they get a 3% automatic compounded COLA, no matter what. So think about that for a second. If you have a $100,000 a year, pension, and you're getting a 3% compounded COLA, that's $3,000 a year, and it continues to compound. By the time this individual, 20 years from now, his pension is going to be worth $171,000. These people are making more money in retirement than the active employees.
Right.
So when you take all 6 of these individuals and you look at how much money are they going to take out of the pension fund in 20 years? Remember I told you they put $764,000 in? They're going to take out over $11 million in 20 years. How can a system be sustained when you're doing things like that? So when we're talking about putting checks and balances and measures and things like that, we're not talking about making someone live on the poverty level, right? So what we're talking about is that, can we afford to do what we're doing right now at the detriment of everything else? Can we be raising people's property taxes by $600 a year? There was such an outcry this year as a result of the high property. What happened this year was the perfect storm. The house values from the $200,000 to $300,000 range, that was the golden spot where those appreciated the most. So what happened is the taxes on those houses went up in further proportion than anything else. What the council people in Warwick are talking about now, they set up a commission to try to see, well, what can we do to maybe see if we can lessen the burden. They're not talking about cutting expenses. What they're talking about doing is maybe exempting, I don't know, 25,000, 50,000 from everybody.
Right.
But what that's going to do is going to push the burden on maybe the people that own a home that's $500,000, $600,000.
Right.
It's not solving the problem. So that's the issue. So we talk about, we have pension programs in the city that are going to make people multimillionaires, right? That's just pensions. Then we talk about lifetime health care in the city. Well, what does lifetime health care mean? Lifetime health care right now means if you're a city employee, well, I want to digress for a second. Years ago, let me tell you the history of lifetime health care in Warwick. Years ago, 30 years ago or whatever, we gave away lifetime health care just for the municipal employees. But if you think about it at that time, family plan health care was probably $2,000, right? So instead of, giving the, municipal employees maybe increases in wages, for, annually wage increases, the city leaders back then said, let's give them lifetime health care. So only municipal employees 20 years ago had lifetime health care. And at the time, it was affordable, right? So you talk to any small business saying right now, what is family plan health care costing? $20,000, $23,000, $24,000, right?
Right.
So back in 2002, then Mayor Scott Avedisian, who has been the architect of the death spiral of Warwick.
And by the way, good news, he's running the Ripter.
Oh yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's great. But so, he's been left off the hook for everything that's going on. So let's think about this. In 2002, Mayor Avedisian negotiated with the police and the firefighters to give them lifetime health care. Now, you would think if someone's going to give away lifetime health care, they would get some experts in. They're called actuarials, right?
Right.
We have them for pensions, so we can figure out how much is this stuff going to cost 20, 30 years down the line. That was never done. It was absolutely never done. Nobody worried about it. Nobody cared about it. So let's fast forward to where we are today. Where we are today is, depending on what you want to look, I'm just going to read from the financial documents. We have $352 million in unfunded healthcare liabilities in the city of Warwick. It's just totally exploded. And
That's not pension, that's health care.
that's healthcare. That's not even pension. I mean, if we want to talk about pensions, our pensions are 331 unfunded liability. So we have $700 million in unfunded. We have $1.6 billion in liabilities in the city of Warwick. And Go Local just did a great article about. We could talk about that in a second. About they looked at Providence and they looked at Warwick's unfunded healthcare at $1.4 billion. But so my point is that think about what's happened in 20 years. That we've got $352 million in unfunded liabilities. And now, when I talk to a lot of people, like, well, Bob, we don't have to pay for all that at one time. You're absolutely right. We don't have to. We keep putting out our credit card. But here's the point. The point is that we're paying now $10 million a year on retiree health care on the city side. $10 million because of lifetime health care. And when I talk about lifetime health, what's lifetime health care? If you're a city employee today and you're paying, I think it might vary, but it's maybe a 20% copay. The day you retire in Warwick, the copay goes away. It's free. For
What?
Yes. It's
What?
lifetime health care. There's no copays. And so when we talk about that, is that reasonable? Is that sustainable? It isn't. So, just as an example of the difference in the policies between the city side and the school side, the school does not have lifetime health care. When you turn 65 years of age in the school department, the teachers go on Medicare. That's fully paid by the teachers. On the city, we pay, so if you retire, say you're 55 years old and you retire from the city, you're getting 10 years of family plan or husband and wife health care totally on the dime of the taxpayers. We have, on the city side, we have caps on prescription drugs of $600. I talk to some elderly people, one prescription can cost them, they can go over that cap in weeks, in months. In the city, you hit $600 and no more money comes out of your pocket. So when we look at all these costs, this is why when you look at the healthcare costs in the city over the years, it's gone from a 216% increase for retiree health care in 15 years. It was $4.8 million in 2004. It's $10.4 million now. It's going up. I don't have to say anything. We have a major health care crisis in America, right?
Right.
The fact of the matter is we need something done. But this is trickling down to the city of Warwick and other cities and towns where the health care expenses are going up sometimes double digits a year. And we just are passing this on to the taxpayers. So let me just go back again for a second. We're paying over $10 million a year on the city side of the budget for retiree health care because the day you retire, you get the health care absolutely free with no copays. What do you think the school department is paying in health care costs because the teachers at 65 go off the system? Oh, and just to digress again, when you turn 65, we're paying the Medicare premium and we're also paying a Part B premium. So we're paying both. In the school department, they're currently projected to pay $500,000 for their health care out of their budget. The city's paying over $10 million.
What is the size of the Warwick budget?
I think it's about $155 million on the city side. It's $156 million, and that was the proposed 2020 budget. So, you're talking about 30% of that budget is being spent on, pension and healthcare expenses. And like I said, so when we start talking about, and we could dive into the firefighter contracts too. When we start talking about reforms, what we're talking about reforms to make the city sustainable, so we can have proper schools, we could repair our school buildings, we could repair our roads, we could give the services to the citizens of Warwick that they deserve. That's the issues that we're talking about. And when we look at what the politicians in the city of Warwick are doing, specifically with this firefighter contract, there's something there's a phrase that you use. It's like what's the cost of an opportunity lost, right? By not doing something, there is some cost to that in the future, right? And we just came in with this Warwick firefighter contract, and everybody's saying it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. We're getting this, we're getting these concessions, and we're setting up this new OPEB trust fund, where future firefighters are going to put 2% of their pay in, right? And it's supposedly going to save, 30%, which we could talk about that in a second, hasn't been proven. The question shouldn't be about, can we continue, giving people lifetime health care with a small percentage. The question, is this even sustainable? Should we even be giving these benefits anymore when we see the trends that are going on in the city and we see the effect that it's having, a rippling effect throughout the entire city? And what I'm talking about in Warwick, it's the same thing that's happening throughout this entire state.
And I want to point that out for a second, just hold that thought for a moment. One of the reasons why we're putting this into a variety of city groups, Providence, Pawtucket, don't think for a moment this isn't coming to a city near you, is it?
You're absolutely right about that. You're absolutely right about that. And everybody wants to concentrate, on pensions and this and that, but when you look at OPEB, for example, there's probably no funding in the entire state on that. So when we talk about, when people go up to the microphone and they're talking about, making common sense, decisions within a contract. So, for example, I say to people, and the discussion never came up during the whole ratification vote on the firefighters' contract. Can we afford to be giving people lifetime health care in the city? Now, we're talking about people that haven't even been hired in the city, right?
Right.
We're talking about new firefighters, and we're coming in and saying, well, you know what? We're going to sign a contract right now, opportunity lost. We're not addressing any kind of co-pays on retirees. We're not addressing any kind of caps on pensions so someone doesn't make $170-something thousand in 20 years, right? We're not talking about any of that stuff. What we're doing is we're drawing a line in the sand and saying we got to pay the $1.1 billion in unfunded liabilities. But starting with new people that are going to get hired in the next couple of years, we're going to make changes. When are we going to see one dime of those savings? When they retire 30 years from now, right?
Right.
And who's going to pay for that? Our grandkids, right? So the question to the politicians is, and everybody gets emotional. Let's take the emotions out of it and get back to, can we afford this, and can we be fair to everybody? Can we be fair to that senior citizen who went to war for us, who's on a fixed income now, who gets nowhere near the health care benefits that some of these other people. We have people in this city that are 55 years old or less that are retiring. They're getting the health care paid until they're 65. When they go on 65, then they're getting the Medicare and the supplemental Medicare paid for. And then you know what they're doing when they're 55? They're not retired. They got another job. They have another job.
Right.
And so we're building multi-millionaires. Is that what we're supposed to do out of these positions and these jobs? No.
Right, and that's why I want to get back, start to go from the beginning, because the conventional wisdom is there was a time early on when municipalities started to grow. Another word for it would be mission creep. Where all of a sudden it wasn't enough just to have the town clerk and the town historian and the chief of police and the volunteer fire department. Our needs became more sophisticated. And there's this sort of twisted waltz and dance, if you will, that takes place between the federal government and state and local governments, because the federal government will place on these governments all sorts of unfunded mandates, which create opportunities for people to work in municipalities. When the concept of municipal employment, full-time municipal employment, came forward, they were not well compensated positions. The, what's the word of the year? Quid pro quo? The quid pro quo, according to conventional wisdom, was that what we would not make up for in salaries would be employee benefit costs. This is at a time in history when employee benefit costs were very low, negligible.
Yeah.
You could employ, I can remember as a very young man, my health care contribution, full health care, what they would consider, not a Cadillac plan now, they consider it a Porsche, Porsche Boxster plan, was about $20 a month.
Yeah.
You know, this was in the 80s. It wasn't that long ago.
Well, and that's why, you know, so you know, police and fire maybe were compensated at higher rates than maybe some of the other, you know, they got life saving jobs and things like that. So you said, as a carrot, we're going to give you the lifetime health care during those years, because, you know, it didn't hit it didn't cost $20,000 a year back then, right?
Right. No, absolutely. So, in a sense, that's my understanding how this all got started. But let's look at Warwick in a really intense focus. While the purpose of the show here is not to villainize individuals, there are, however, people that need to be held accountable. These are folks who are, in their own way, highly compensated by the city of Warwick and the taxpayers, and they were invested in them was a fiduciary responsibility. Now, this is an interesting subject for me because I'm a libertarian, and so is Link Chafee now.
Oh boy, lucky you.
You know, Link was a mayor of Warwick for some time. What was the approach, if you think back, all those years ago? What was Link's approach to government? And, you know, he left for a larger field, if you will, a bigger audience. He hit the big time by going to the United States Senate. And part and parcel of that was the next mayor, Mr. Abedisian, was the right-hand man, if you will, or at least outside of Warwick, that was the perception.
Yeah.
So what happened there what was it like with Link, and then?
So what Chafee tried to do, and we're talking about the topic, you know, back then we had this called Fire One, Police One pension plan. We never put any money into it, nothing. So what Chafee did is he put an end to that. And, you know, I think right now if you look at the funding ratio, it's like 20-something%. It's terrible. And then he started up these things called Police 2, Fire 2. You know what I mean? So what Warwick's been doing, and, you know, what the politicians in Warwick will tell you is that, you know, and I think we spend, I don't have the figure right off the top of my head how much we're spending for the pension plans and things like that, but what they will tell you is that, you know, once we get this arbitrage of Police One, Fire One off our books, we're going to be able to take all that money and we're going to be putting it into, you know, on a Police 2, Fire 2 pension plans. Right. The problems that you're seeing right now is the benefit structure within the Police 2 and Fire 2 is escalating the cost and the unfunded liability so fast is that, you know, I believe once, you know, the Police and Fire One that, you know, Link Chafee tried to kind of like amortize over 40 years, once that's paid up, the payments are going to go right back into the pension funds now because of the extravagant benefits that you're given. So I don't give Chafee any kudos for, you know, some of the things that he did, because he was kind of part of the process of giving out these benefits, like you're giving out candy on Halloween night. And I got to say one thing about Scott Abedisian. He was the worst. I mean, Scott Abedisian put this city basically almost to its knees. But I got to say one thing about Scott Abedisian. A politician in terms of being able to spin, you know, seemed like a very nice guy, but behind the scenes he was brutal. The thing is, he had everybody fooled. He had everybody. He didn't have me fooled and other kinds of people fooled. Right. But you know, and you know, I want to dovetail into somebody called Joseph Solomon, who was the councilman for 20 years under most of Aberdeen. And if you saw Joe Solomon as a councilman, constantly hitting the Aberdeen administration about these costs. What are we going to do about these? We got to put some checks and balances and things like that. A real advocate for the taxpayer. And then, you know, last year at this time in February, he came out with the first State of the City address where he talked about, we got a major fiscal crisis on our hands in February. And then, I don't know what happened. Did somebody beam that Joe Solomon up and beam somebody else down? Because we don't have a crisis anymore. Starting in April of last year, I joke to people that, if Joe Solomon was still on the city council, and we got the Joe Solomon in office right now, the Joe Solomon councilman would be totally against what he's doing.
Right.
I'm totally disappointed in the fact that the message that he sent for 20 years on the council is not the message that he is sending as the mayor. And you know what? I just think, an opportunity lost with this firefighter contract where things are going to get worse. When you see the amount of money, it's taking almost every single year about $2 million. Let me back up for a second. A maximum tax increase in Warwick is $8.5 million. We're spending $2 million a year just for increased pensions and health care. That's 25%, right? Now, on top of, contractual raises and everything else, we had a 5-year forecast done, first time ever, by the city council. And they were projecting deficits as far as the eyes can see for the next 5 years. The school department did the same thing, same kind of deficits. I think, and I'm talking a little nuance here. I think Mayor Solomon can actually, he's put so much fudge into the budget this year with, he had $1 million allocated for contractual raises and for the firefighters. He had $750,000 to do some kind of studies and things like that. I think next year you're going to see it. Well, this year's an election year where what they're going to do is they're going to have a small tax increase. They're going to have a small tax increase because they've kind of put a lot of fat in the budget. They're probably going to slam the school department again. And what they're going to do is they're going to tap the surplus. So it's going to look like everything looks pretty good.
Right.
Now, in the meantime, what's going on is that for the first time ever, we borrowed $16 million to repair our roads. We've never borrowed money to repair our roads. It used to come out of the general fund budget, right? So now you're borrowing money to do that. So you're pushing that off. That's going to be future tax increases they're going to have to pay for that, right? And the other thing that we're doing, and this is really interesting, when the 5-year forecast was presented to the city council, the expert came in and basically said, I'm going to equate a family of 4 to what the city of Warwick's financial position is in. And he basically said, you have a house loan, you have a car loan, but the problem is you have $250,000 on your credit cards.
Right.
And what's happening into the city of Warwick, and this is the same thing that would happen to a family of 4 that has $250,000 on their credit card. The minimum payments are getting so high that it's taking away from anything else that you want to do. So like, for example, and this is what's happened over the last 10 to 15 years in Warwick. So if you want to fix your roof up, or if you want to, do something and there's some kind of emergency in your home, you're not going to be able to do that. You're going to have to put a top on the leaky roof because you don't have any money to pay for that, right? So Warwick's done that for 15 years. Our buildings were totally run down. We passed bond measures that were frozen for a decade for the schools, So our roads have been, totally neglected. So what's happening now, though, this is kind of a nuance. The credit agencies do not look at the credit card debt. They don't look at the pensions and the health care, the hundreds of millions of dollars in unfunded loans. They don't look at that.
Right.
It's like they're not looking at. So what they're saying is that Warwick's got a great credit rating. You can borrow more money. And I think what Warwick is going to do, and they've already started doing this, and I think what Mayor Solomon's going to do, he's already borrowed $16 million to repair the roads. They're talking about maybe building another high school. This is the final card in the house of cards that can be played. And I think Mayor Solomon can probably have a successful mayoralship in terms of getting things done. But what he's doing by playing that final card, he's going to rack up the debt, the municipal bond debt. And whoever's the next person that's going to come in my opinion, they're going to be left with this unfunded pensions, unfunded health care, and then the municipal bond debt is going to be so high. We might be able to build a school, and everything's going to look great, and you're going to see roads being repaved, and you know what it is to me? I have my deck, and it's rotting from behind, but I slap a nice coat of paint on it, and it looks great. But someday, it's going to collapse, and I think that's what's going to happen in the city of Warwick.
Has anyone, we know no one in the government's tried to do that, has anyone in the activist community, yourself included, try to calculate sort of a doomsday scenario? I mean, is it in Providence? It's always been a question of the burn rate of cash. Mm-hmm. All right. Warwick, we're just like I said. I'm getting up to speed on now through your good graces. Is and let's counter this, juxtapose this in the light of that we are in the longest running, hottest bull market
Yeah.
in investment securities in the history of the planet. Mm-hmm. And yet, I was discussing on Dan York's show today, what's not being publicized is that if you will, a Trumpian quantitative easing is taking place where they're sinking billions into the money supply, which is effectively inflating the stock market. So
what do you think is going to happen to these pension funds, right?
Right.
When the shoe drops and we have some kind of major correction, right?
Corrections are inevitable.
So here's the way Warwick works, though, and this is really interesting. So the way Warwick works is that they have this thing. We pay the actuaries come in and based on how well the pension funds are doing, and if there's there's a downturn in the market, we pay 2/3 of the annual required contribution, and the employees pay 1/3. So let's say at some point, we have a massive dive in the market. What that's going to do is make the annual required contribution have to be more for the city, which is going to divert more funds from the regular budget,
Right.
in terms of what we need to do. The other thing is healthcare costs aren't going down, right? We put no caps. We still have we have healthcare within the city where we're paying, some of them maybe a 20% copay. I'm going to tell you one thing. I work for one of the largest companies in America. I wish we were paying a 20% copay. That might have been a decade ago.
Yeah, I would say that's so 2005.
It is 2005. So the fact of the matter is the 20% copay isn't cutting it. And the other thing too is, if you really start digging into the actual benefits of the plans, you could go get. I had a situation where I had a health thing that I had to happen. It cost me $2,000 out of pocket for a CAT scan, whatever I had to get done. When you look at the amount of money for under these plans, it's $10. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you can.
We're change diving on the couch for that.
Oh, it's unbelievable. So, you talked about, when is it going to happen? I could say within 5 to 10 years. I mean, within 5 to 10 years, we're going to have a real issue. This year, the school department did their forecast, and the teachers in Warwick are one of the highest paid in the state. I did an analysis, and we looked at, I think, 15 years ago, the per pupil cost, I think, was $11,000 a student. Today, it's 19. But now here's the kicker: we've closed schools, we've reduced employment by 200 to 300, employees. Why is the per student cost going up so high? Because on the problem with the school budget is different from the city budget. I talked about the city budget being the legacy cost, right?
Right.
Pensions and health care. On the school side, it's the active employee costs, that are going out of control. And the problem is, so we heard, Karen Backus is the school committee chairwoman, and as part of their kickoff for their 5-year forecast, she said we basically need 3 zeros from the school department, the teachers. You think you're going to get that? Forget it, you're not going to get that. This is the final year of their contract. The experts came in, they did a 5-year forecast in the school department, and they're saying they need about $6 million this year, coming up. We can only raise taxes $8 million. Now, when pensions are going up on the city side, healthcare is going up on the city side, we need hundreds of thousands of dollars for raises for the employees. When you look at the 5-year forecast, we're looking at 8, 9, 10, 11, $12 million that we're going to need, and we can only raise taxes 8. I don't know what they're going to do. Are they going to slap the school department down and have another possible Carullo Act? Are they going to cut school sports again? Who knows what's going to happen with that? It's a big mess. But the thing is, I think what's going to hit the fan within 5 to 10 years. I can't see this going on. And, unfortunately, I think we should talk about some of the politics in the city and who we've elected in the city over the last year. And this is the same kind of problems in Providence or any other city. People just don't pay attention to who they elect.
If you're just joining us, Bob Cushman is joining us live in studio. He's conducting what I call Warwick 101, which is where we are, how we got there, and we're about to jump into the players. This program, of course, I'd like to point out, is sponsored by a number of local companies, some national. I'd like to thank, first of all, Beacon Shipping and Logistics, a Warwick-based company, international automobile shipper with international reach, based right here in Warwick, Rhode Island. So, folks, if you're part of our national libertarian audience and you listen to this later tonight, you're moving Susie from USC because she didn't get in and she used someone else's exams and she's got to come back home to URI. Beacon Shipping and Logistics. Our other sponsors, the Yacht Club Bottling Company, Rhode Island's boutique soda before they knew they needed boutique soda. Listen, their root beer is fabulous. So even at this time of year, imagine last night at the height of the chill, could have been better than a vanilla ice cream and root beer float? You know, we're coming up to the Super Bowl. All right, enough of that. So anyway, Bob Cushman's in studio. It's a deadly serious subject. You know, it's tough because folks like me have been crying wolf for a long time. Legitimately, the numbers stink. But the focus has always been on Providence. You know, away from, you know, obviously Central Falls and West Warwick have had their misadventures, but we're going to talk about some of the characters involved. And how is it that Scott Avedisian kept this on the down low for so long? How did that happen?
You know, I think what he did was, for a period of almost a decade, he level funded the school. So what was happening with the school department? The number of students was dramatically, being reduced. I mean, I think I have a figure here. I think it went from God, I can't read my writing over here, but I mean, the student population was dropping dramatically. So, you know, over the last decade, we've closed a lot of schools, a lot of neighborhood schools and things like that. So what happened was that the school department was level funded in terms of local appropriation almost for 10 years. Now, let me go back for a second.
Well, explain what level funding is.
Level funding means is, you know, if I give you $100 this year, I'm giving you $100 next year in your budget. It's not going up. You know, so the school department budget actually, and I'm gonna correct myself. Do you remember the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009?
Yeah.
So everybody knows that. The General Assembly passed a special law that basically said remember Governor Kacheri basically knocked off, I think, tens of millions of dollars of state aid to the local communities, right?
Right.
And
eight to cities and towns.
Yeah, 8 to cities. And in exchange for that, they created a special law that says you can go after the education budget and cut it as much as 5%. Right? So they gave that option to the cities and towns to go after the education budget. Well, guess who's the only city that cut the education budget by 5%? City of Warwick. They cut the Warwick budget, I think it was $6 million that year. And you know, I think they got cut state aid, might have been $13 million that year too. So what they did is they had a massive tax increase, right, to get the money they need because they lost the state aid. They got the $6 million from the school department, diverted it to the city side of the budget.
Right.
And then if you ever look at the charts, basically the city got the same amount of money that it got before the state aid was cut. They just got it from different sources. Right. So there was no real institutional cuts that were made, structural changes and cuts to the budget, right? So what happened is the school department had a massive cut. They had to cut programs and services. They continued to close more schools. And this continued to happen for, like I said, a period of about a decade. And you saw the results. I mean, the results, if you walked into the school, finally they're starting to repair the school buildings and things like that. But you saw the effects. So what Scott Avedisian was able to do was divert all that money. You know, I don't have the charts and graph with me, but there was one point in time where the allocation of local tax dollars back in 2004 was 60% to the schools and 40% to the city. Right now, we're close to 50-50. We're close to 50-50. That means we've took tens of millions of dollars and diverted that money from the education system over to the city side of the budget. So by doing that, you didn't have to address lifetime health care. You didn't have to address all these pension problems. You beat up the school department for years. Now, the school department is no angels in the city of Warwick. I just told you about the fact that the per pupil cost is $19,000. I mean, we would be better to send all the kids in the high schools to Hendricken and pay the $15,000, $16,000 and close all the schools up, right?
Well, you know, Dan York, if you're listening, I've had endless national experts on something called educational savings accounts, which would do just that. You know, and I'm...
Well, you know, Warwick had a great opportunity to open up a charter school in the old Aldridge Junior High School, and they shot it down. I don't know why they did, but you know what?
I think we know why.
We could dive into education a little bit, but you know, getting back to your main question, Scott Avedisian was a masterful politician. What Scott Avedisian did in the city of Warwick, think about it. At most, he had one Republican on the city council, and everybody else was the Democrats. How would a guy be able to do that? Because this guy basically destroyed any kind of political opposition with the Democrats by giving out jobs, right? You know, I mean, giving out favors to these council people. So it got to the point where, when you talk to a reporter, oh, that was the old Democrat council that did that, and people believed it, but behind the scenes he was so cozy with them, he basically got whatever he wanted. Now, there was a faction. There's the Steve Marola, who's been on there for 20 years, who's still on there, who's the council president, and now you've got Ed Lattisaw.
Yeah, let's break that down, because it's interesting. You have a rather notorious former councilwoman who is now on the in the legislature now. I believe Ms. Wilkinson.
Oh, jeez.
Was and please correct me if I'm wrong, because after a while, trying to track all this is madness. My understanding was she was a supporter of the Evergreen contracts, wasn't she?
Yeah, she absolutely was. She was the main sponsor.
Right.
So this is a woman who was sitting and seeing all this stuff going on in Warwick. She was somebody that even kind of went after me, my credentials and everything. He's a hobbyist. I mean, not a nice person. When it came time to to look at the facts and the figures and things like that, she played the same kind of political game as everybody else. These people don't know what they're talking about. We don't have a pension problem. We're making the payments and things like that. And what does she do? I think she ran against Eileen Norton that time. And she said, I'm against tolls, right?
Right.
And then when she got in, we never heard it from her again. Total hypocrite.
Well, she used that to leverage. She also purports to be sympathetic to the 2A crowd. And so when you do those things, there's a tendency to ignore the other ills. If you're one of the groups that's involved in that, and I've had the pleasure of getting to know several of them, there's this tendency, and this for all of us, not a criticism, that they're great on our issue. How bad could they be on the other ones? Well, in this case, really, really, really bad, isn't it?
And I want to get back into the local, but let's talk about, just for a second, let's talk about how much influence does Warwick legislators have up at the State House, right? I mean, I think we have the majority leader in the Senate. We have Vella Wilkinson, and we have some other people that we have Joe Sacacci, right? Who's
the wealthiest, the biggest fundraiser in the state.
And guess what all these people did? They passed Evergreen. Knowing how detrimental that was going to be to the cities and towns. Do you think the school department is going to have an easy time being able to reduce the $19,000 per year student cost and get real reforms in the next teacher contract? No way. It's not going to happen. I was on the school committee for 3 years, from 2003 to 2006. You know what we're heading for right now? We're heading for work to rule. We're heading for the kids being really hurt because the school department, and I don't even know if we have school committee members who have the guts and the conviction to go after what needs to be done, because we hired we voted for 2 young kids. They're in their 20s, and I don't even, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I don't really think they have a pulse on what's going on in the city and what needs to be done. And the fact of the matter is, what needs to be done is some major concessions. A consultant came in and said that the school department teachers union has to have some major concessions. And I'm going to tell you one thing, with the Evergreen contract in place and dealing with this union is almost impossible.
Right. And this is why we probably need to do a session every week, because folks, if you're not up to date on the Evergreen contract, essentially contracts remain in force until new contracts are agreed upon.
Yes.
There is no ability, there are, the tool chest is the cliche often applied to the situation. There is no ability at this point by municipal and state governments to go in and try and do something to mitigate the ongoing damage.
So in terms of the school department, so what's the only leverage the school department can have? Okay, we're not going to give out raises, but what's going to happen is all the other kind of educational reforms that they need to be made are not going to get done too, because they're protected by Evergreen. So the question's going to be, okay, who's going to play chicken? How long can you go on without, like, say, take a 0% raise, and now the kids aren't getting the field trips, and people don't pay attention in the cities and towns, unfortunately, and the parents want what's good for their kids, and it's very easy to create the narrative, my teacher deserves this and that and whatever, not looking at the entire picture, and it's going to get to a point there's going to be so much pressure put on the school committee that's probably going to cave. But you know what? Maybe this is all good news, because maybe if all this happens, it might lead to, the point where we have to declare a fiscal emergency in the city.
Right.
Joe Solomon basically came out in February and said we have a major fiscal crisis. I knew nothing about it, which he did know about it. And then for the last 10 months, it's magically gone away. We have a major fiscal crisis in the city of Warwick. And the thing that can happen, we don't have politicians with the guts and a mayor with the guts to actually declare that, because if they did, there's Cranston won a major, I think it went up to the United States Supreme Court, I believe, right? That reaffirmed the fact, or I guess the case wasn't taken. So the lower courts basically said, because you had a fiscal crisis on your hands, you can unilaterally make changes. Do you think maybe we should stop paying people $171,000 a year on a pension, right? Do you think maybe we should stop with a $300 cap on prescription drugs for single plan and $600 for family plan? Do you think maybe we should stop with free lifetime health care when you retire from the city of Warwick, right? Well, if you declared a fiscal emergency, and I don't know if you followed us, we had Judge Flanders come in, and we had a group called the Financial Crisis Group in Warwick. And, they're still around and things. And Flanders came in, and he basically said that by declaring that fiscal emergency, you can take those things. Now the thing you don't want to do is, the unions, they're going to look at this, and they'll be picketing my house or whatever. You're not going to put people on the poverty line, but these extremes have to be looked at, and they have to be eliminated. And what was the opportunity lost with this firefighter contract? None of this was addressed. Absolutely none of it was addressed. We drew a line in the sand and said, you know what, we're going to have to stop paying that $700 million unfunded liability. That's what we said.
Well, and at a certain part in time, you just have to draw that line in the sand.
The politicians in the city will not do that, and I could tell you why. You just talked about the Vella Wilkinsons. It's really sad because the unions have such great representation. They can hire people to negotiate for them, and they do a great job with that, right? What do? We elect people in office to hopefully, have a balanced approach to represent all the needs of the entire community. That's not going on in Warwick. When you have 5 council members in Warwick who already prejudged this contract, who never read it, and they were so PO'd that people like me had the gall to get up there at the December 16th meeting, and we spent 5 hours, I think, that night. It actually went into midnight, and they had to call the meeting off. Councilman Howell, I believe he's in Ward 4, was so upset about that you know what he did? He blamed it on the city council president, and I'm going to tell you one thing. I didn't come there, and Ken blocked it, and nobody else came there out of somebody from the council telling us to go there. We came there because we're citizens. We actually read the contract, we analyzed it, and we found major deficiencies in the contract. Councilman Howe, Councilman Sinapi, McElroy, and McAllister didn't read this contract. They wanted to rubber stamp that contract through that night. When they couldn't get that done, they actually basically went behind the city councilman's back, and they pulled a parliamentary maneuver to schedule a meeting on December 20th, the Friday before Christmas. And they actually got constables to serve the council members to do that. And I don't know, you probably heard the news where the meeting was, they attempted to hold the meeting.
Right.
But they did something illegal where they didn't serve everybody, and the meeting was thrown out and be found to be illegal.
Right.
So the question you would have to ask is, why would somebody go to such extremes to try to get a contract passed, right? And let's talk about that, because now, January 6th, which was this Monday, we had the meeting again, and I gotta give kudos to Councilman Marola, who went through methodically, Councilman Ladisor, of all the deficiencies, and they got the administration and people to agree that there's major language deficiencies. And what happened in Warwick with the last couple of contracts? The interpretation of the language was different. It was grieved by the firefighters, and we ended up putting 50 to 60 firefighters back into more of a lucrative pension program that's costing us hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and about $4 million after we finance all the payments for the next 20 years.
Right.
So you would think people would want to dot their I's, cross their T's, and make sure there's no ambiguity within that contract within the language. That didn't happen. They didn't care about that. You would think council members would want to make sure when you get a fiscal note that says we have a 30% savings because people are going to put 2% of your pay into an OPEB trust fund, that's really true. And let me tell you one thing. This is not an OPEB trust fund. You know what it is? They're putting 2% of their pay into this, they're calling it an OPEB trust fund. But what's going to happen is there's going to be a fixed rate that they're going to pay when they retire.
Right.
It's going to be pennies. I calculated, this is the fiscal note that the city provided, and it gave all the parameters to put a model together. Mm-hmm. And I put a model together, and it had the starting salaries, and anybody could easily figure this out. If you took an employee that's hired today, and you looked at how much is he going to put into the OPEB trust fund over his entire career, he's going to work at 25, he's going to work for 30 years, they had all the parameters in, he's going to put $84,000 into this OPEB trust fund. They're assuming a 6.9% return on the investments. That would be $128,000. He's going to live until he's 80 years old. So his OPEB trust fund is going to be at $212,000. Now think about this for a second, the way this is written. The day you retire, you're 55 years old. The actuaries determine that you're going to live 25 more years. They divide the $212,000 into 25. It's about $8,500 that's going to come out of your account every single year, right? It's fixed. It's fixed. It's fixed.
Done.
At the same time, your investments are going to grow by 6.9%. So, to make a long story short, based on the calculations and all the parameters in, this healthcare cost for this person from 55 to 80 years old is going to be $1.8 million. The firefighter is going to pay about 11% of that through the OPEB trust fund, $212,000. Here's the kicker. Because of this contract, there's stipulations in there. His funds are going to continue to grow.
Right.
When he passes away, his estate is going to get a check for $561,000. This is not an OPEB trust fund. This is basically an annuity that's being set up. And here's what my fear is. My fear, and this didn't come out in the meeting, is that what Mayor Solomon's going to do in the administration, when you set up an OPEB trust fund, when you don't have an OPEB trust fund, you can't discount the unfunded liabilities. You have to use, I think, a lower rate. It's like I don't know.
Well, and pension accounting via the IRS is very strict.
It is very strict. So, but the point is this. So right now, we got on our books $352 million unfunded liabilities, right? This is for all the employees right now. So from this OPEB trust fund, not one dime of this gets reduced. But is the administration going to discount this at a higher rate now because they set up an OPEB trust fund?
Right.
And if they do that, that to me is like a Ponzi scheme. They can knock off $150 million or more from this, So I mean, we kind of digress into something.
No, this is again, it's an incredibly nuanced, multi-layer, multi-participant equation here. There's no easy way around this.
People need to really keep an eye on that, because if the administration does this on the financial books, what that is creating, it's creating a false projection of how well run the city of Warwick is. If you're discounting by hundreds of millions of dollars unfunded liabilities based on a contract that's affecting new employees, that shouldn't be touched. But let's see what happens. And I'm kind of glad I had this show, because we could have this video and we could play it back again maybe weeks and months from now if they try to pull a stunt like this.
Right. No, I know, absolutely. Now, so you've got a couple of decades worth of malfeasance, incompetence, ignorance.
Well,
ignoring this. I mean, it's not like this is not. You've got this huge cancerous number staring you guys every year, hitting you right upside the head.
And we got 5 council people, come hell or high water, was going to pass this thing. They weren't going to correct the language. We have Mayor Solomon coming in and saying that this new scheduling is going to cut hundreds of thousands of dollars from the overtime. But here's what I did, and I want your viewers to know this. A couple of years ago, overtime in Warwick for the firefighters, $1.7 million. Because they didn't have a contract, Mayor Solomon in the last budget year said, I'm not hiring any new firefighters until I get a contract. Totally understand that. what he did is he upped the overtime to 3.8 million. Never, no wait, it's never been that high because what's going to happen now is because of minimum manning and everything, right, guys? You're short staffed. These guys are going to have to work more, right? So he put 3.8 million into the overtime. Now, you would think, as a result of this contract being ratified, you're going to hire more firefighters, get your complement up, right? And you would think that the overtime would go down. But see, nobody looks at the fiscal notes. When you look at the fiscal note for overtime, it's by the third year of the contract, it's still at 3.8 million. Well, how could that be? If this thing is the greatest thing since sliced bread and it's going to save all this money, why do you have the overtime at 3.8 million in your fiscal note? Something's not right there. And that question hasn't been answered, and a boatload of other questions weren't answered that night. You know, another thing about this contract, the Supreme Court of Rhode Island just ruled, I think there's no presumption of cancer. You know, I think if so there was a case, I guess, and I'm not a lawyer, that someone, a firefighter received cancer, and I guess he was a heavy smoker or something like that, and he said basically it was as a result of his job, it was a presumption.
Right.
The state Supreme Court said no. Guess what we did in this contract? We have that clause in this contract. Right. So now we just went against the state Supreme Court. Why would those 5 Warwick council members do this? Here's what I'm hearing, the scuttlebutt.
Let me go first and let me see if
Okay.
I can get a jump on this. I mean, no, go ahead. My mind will be so evil that I'll just.
Well, so what I'm hearing is that, you know, you can see it on the Beacon blogs, and there's people blogging, and I hope someone would investigate.
And by the way, just as an aside, now, is the local newspaper still on the outs in terms of reporting?
I don't know. You know, I know there was an article about how the administration and the mayor wouldn't let them in. So I don't know. I think he meets with them. I couldn't. You're probably gonna have to call John Howell about that.
Okay, just throwing that out there. That was the scuttlebutt.
So the thing that I'm hearing, and I'm hearing rumors, and I'm reading stuff, and this is all unsubstantiated, but we know for a fact this Councilman McElroy, his daughter was provided a municipal judgeship, you know, a few months ago, and I think the council was kind of split on that. We have now some rumors about Councilman Howell's daughter being hired for the sewer. I don't know if this stuff is true, you know, but this fits into the Scott Avedisian playbook of how you make your enemies your friends and you make them beholden to you.
Right.
You know, so if the fact of the matter is, and I think someone should, this isn't illegal, it's probably legal to do this, but it would explain a lot where people were so hell-bent on getting this contract passed, and getting this contract passed even with all the issues and the problems in it.
Right.
You know?
Wow.
And you know what? Come on, this happens all over the place, right? Probably happens in every city and town, you know? So you know, what we could talk about, what's the remedy, right?
Is there one?
Well, there is a remedy. The remedy is for people to kind of, you know, get involved, and we need, you know, these 5 council people. You have Donna Travis, who's been there for 20 years, but all the rest of them, we have Sinapi, Howe, McElroy, and McAllister. They've only been there for like 4 years or so.
Right.
They've totally taken over this council now. They've basically created a coup d'etat. Councilman Marola and Councilman Lattisaw tried to get an updated fiscal note to be able to get the true cost of these things. They were overridden by Councilman Sinapi pulling a parliamentary maneuver. And now the talk is that, you know, and I don't know if this is true, this is rumors, but hey, I could talk about rumors, it's my opinion, that Councilman Sinapi was texting the mayor, and I don't know if that's true or not, to pull off these maneuvers. But so what do we need to do? We need to get people to run for office that are going to run on a real platform of looking at all these issues and not being afraid to tackle these issues. And not run for office because you want to get your buddy or your wife or your cousin or your in-laws or this a job. It's not about self-service, it's about public service, right?
Right.
And you know what? These 5 council people should be totally ashamed of themselves because there's been nothing but self-service, in my opinion, on this council. Something stinks in Warwick, and I hope someone takes a look at what's going on there.
The mayor was just well, I should say that. Let's go down the election schedule, if you will. The Avedisian is elected. You know, the word on the street had been for months that he was going to head the Ripter. Why he chose to run again, if I have the timeline correctly. So he resigns.
Yeah.
After an international search, Councilman Solomon, he assumes. Now, what's the next time he's up for election?
This November. Warwick only has a 2-year, and it's good and bad. The bad point about it is that, think, what can you get done in 2 years? Like, if, I was on I was on the council for 1 term. I was on the council for 1 term because I talk just like I'm talking right now. We need to eliminate lifetime health care, and we need to put caps on our pensions, and I actually, wrote ordinances to do that, and all hell broke loose, with the unions because they want to protect what they want. And, and I'm going to say one thing about the unions. They're probably going to be coming out in force against Marola, Ladisor, and some of the other, those 4 council people who had the nerve to kind of talk and stick up for doing the right thing. So, people, they have a lot of power. They have a lot of power, and I think people, become afraid. But let's just say this. Let's talk about the Warwick GOP. I'm an independent now. The Warwick GOP, to me, has been totally ineffective for years. Avedisian destroyed the Warwick GOP. There's been no opposition. And what he ended up doing is he basically created the Democrat-Republican Party.
Well, and I'll come specific with something I heard. Mike Underwood, who is a friend of the show and a pal, good man, ran for office, was it 2 times ago? Vella Wilkinson, correct my dates, Vella Wilkinson he was running against, and one of your hybrid Republicans/Democrats was put in to split the oppositional vote.
Oh, I believe that.
Right, and thus, essentially denied it at the time, was seen out and about and campaigned with, was where it was clear that the fix was in. That there was no intent whatsoever to give the citizens of Warwick a real choice.
Yeah, no, I agree that. I agree with that. Vella Wilkinson was a charlatan. She would say one thing and she would do something totally different.
Right.
I think Mike Underwood would have been a great candidate. I think right now, if I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be honest with you. I do not plan on, here's one thing that you and I can do, and residents of Warwick can do, if you have the means. I could leave. I don't have to pay for all this stuff. I mean, right now I'm still working. You think when I retire, my plans are to stop paying all these, absorbent taxes, bad schools, and everything else, and stay in Warwick? It isn't. And if more people start doing what I'm planning on doing, Warwick's going to be in trouble.
Right.
Warwick's going to be in trouble. But the thing is, I think I would like to see, and I don't care if you're a Republican or Democrat, I want to see people get together. And it's about the issues and what you recognize as the problems in the city and what your platform is going to be. Do you have the guts to talk about this stuff and go up against and propose changes to these things, regardless of what the unions say? And like I said, I could say whatever I want. They're going to say Cushman's an SOB and this and that. We're not looking. You know what we're looking at? You know what the firefighters are complaining about now? And people, their equipment's all broken down. They don't have the right equipment to do their jobs, DPW and everything. Well, you know why that's the case? Because 30% of your budget is going towards all these legacy costs. So the thing that we're trying to tell these guys, listen, you can't be making, when you retire, a $2 million pension, $100,000 a year with a 3% automatic COLA. You know what I mean? You can't be paying free. Solomon's already acquiesced. He drew a line in the sand and basically said, I'm not going after the lifetime health care benefits that are free. We have to pay for those. We're not going to be able to pay for those. It's funny, we talk about this new OPEB plan that's going to be a model throughout the state. You know what? We're never going to see the day that these savings kick in because we will be in bankruptcy by then. We're not going to get to 30 years where this stuff kicks in, And the fact that we have some council people who got a commission where they want to have taxpayer relief, but what they want to do is they want to push the burden on the higher property values. Okay? So maybe people who live in Potawatomi or other parts of the city where you have the $600,000-$700,000 house, you're going to pay more. And just something just sparked in my head. I'd like to talk about it, but when are we going to talk about stop the need for new revenue and start talking about the expense side of the budget? We never do that, right?
They fail to understand. There's a dynamic here at work, whether you're talking about a state-level millionaire's tax, as it's now been called, or some, God forbid, we start getting in the state into the notion where we're really providing multiple tiers of graduated property taxes.
That's what's going to happen in Warwick.
Right. People with money have options.
Yeah.
Now, is that fair in the global sense? Maybe not.
You think about it for a second. I have a friend of mine, and we look at some of the houses. We have some houses on Narragansett Parkway that are 700, 800,000. I mean, could you imagine what the property taxes went up this year? Why would you want to do that when you could maybe just go move down to East Greenwich or another town that's better run, right? You know what I'm saying? I mean, people aren't going to want to stick around.
You tack yourself into oblivion, and all of a sudden Barrington becomes attractive.
Yeah. Yeah, and then that, I wanted to touch on something that really annoys me. So Go Local ran a story about Warwick and Providence's OPEB, unfunded liabilities, being 1.4 billion, right? Mm-hmm. And then we got the great, Dennis Hoyle, who's basically saying that we need to start up OPEB funds. Dennis Hoyle Ernie Almonte was the Auditor General back years ago when they put pension reform in, right? And I think Dennis worked for Almonte. Well, I remember going up with other people from Warwick, and we talked about that to the Municipal Pension Commission. And what we talked to them about was, hey guys, they weren't even talking about OPEB back then. First of all, when you start looking at your budgets, it's not only pensions, it's the OPEB cost. You got to look at them combined, right?
Right.
And we used to tell them that. And we used to tell them, we sat there, remember they talked about like if your pension fund's less than 65%, it's in stress and you got to come up with a remediation plan. Mm-hmm. Well, I went to a meeting once where I swear to God, they spent 20 minutes. They rattled off 30 pension plans, their remediation plans, and they accepted them. They should have had the big rubber stamp out.
Ba-boom.
Because it wasn't worth the paper it was on. They spent all of 30 seconds looking at this, and Warwick was one of them. And we got up there and we started talking about what the impact. We talked about the impact of Warwick, of programs being cut for seniors, kids programs being cut. Right. We talked about the whole 9 yards. When we said all this stuff, they looked at us like we had 3 heads up there. And instead of these people coming in and saying, why doesn't Dennis Hoyle say that it's not about setting up an OPEB trust fund, it's about looking at the actual benefits that you're getting out and are they affordable?
Right.
And why don't you, the Auditor General of the state of Rhode Island propose some legislation up at the State House like you did for Evergreen to eliminate some of this stuff statewide and put caps on pensions, put caps on health care, because it's never going to happen at the municipal level. The unions are too powerful, and it's not going to happen at the state level too. But you know what? I would have more respect if he said something like that instead of, you need to start up an OPEB trust fund. We don't have any money to start up an OPEB trust fund.
If you had the money to do that, you'd simply increase your rate that you were investing in the pension funds.
You're absolutely right about that. We barely have enough.
That's like saying to someone who's got $20,000 worth of, or $50,000 worth of credit card debt, you should be putting more money in your retirement fund. It ceases to make any sense whatsoever.
Combined, I look at the pensions and the health care. What is it? In 2004 was 25.6 million. Combined, it's 57.4 million. That's double in 15 years. We're spending $2 million more each year on that cost, and nobody wants to talk. And like I said, I'm not talking about going after the person that's making. There is some people in the city. The pension plans are so convoluted. There's different tiers and everything. There are probably some people out there that are making $30,000 a year. We're not talking about putting them in the poorhouse and the widow. You know what I mean? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about you have a system that lets someone have the capability of making $130,000, $140,000, $150,000 a year as a pension. More money than the active employee makes, right?
More money than a significant part of the state makes.
That's what we're talking about. It's like the Buddy Cianci 6% COLAs that were allowed years ago, right?
Right.
And what's the only way that this could possibly? I would love to see someone come in and run for mayor. You know what? I'd love to see run for mayor in Warwick. I'm going to throw a name, Gail Corrigan. I don't know if you saw her. Gail came up, and I've never met her before, and she came up in that council meeting and basically said that there is never, the mayor is saying this is a cost-neutral contract, and she said there's no such thing as a cost-neutral contract. This contract needs to be set to set out for an expert analysis to make sure you understand everything that's in it and what the cost is. And she said she has the experience. She was running East Greenwich. She said, I will put up $10,000 of my own money to pay for the study.
Right.
Well, no, and
Then she was assailed because of the potential conflict of interest of her donating money to pay for the study.
well, it wasn't like she was going to do the study or a firm that she worked for. I mean, come on.
It gets ludicrous after the thin hooks that they will hang their hat on in order to put a roadblock into greater progress.
Yeah.
Is breathtaking to watch.
You know, I'm going to tell you one thing. You don't dot your I on a document. Oh, that's wrong because of that. But you know, it's kind of funny though. But when you look at the actual firefighter contract that has material errors in it that could be worth tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, and there's no problem with that. You know, we're going to fix that. You know, it's interesting. Councilman Marola made an interesting point. He said, okay, you know, right now we passed this contract and things like that, and, you know, maybe the current union president isn't going to grieve this or anything, but let's think about this for a second.
Right.
He said, you know, 4 or 5 years from now, you might have a new representative who's the union president. When these new firefighters come in and we haven't dotted our I's and crossed our T's on this so-called OPEB fund,
Right.
they could come in and say, well, we interpret it this way, we're going to grieve it, and you're going to go take it to arbitration, and that's exactly what happened with Warwick. When we moved firefighters, it was called a lesser benefit, Tier 2. We didn't do it the right way, and we moved them back to Tier 1, and it's costing us between $2 to $4 million. That same thing could happen now, you know?
Yeah, it's wow. So it's almost fair to say that financially and spiritually, Warwick may be the next town to enter some type of municipal
Well,
finance.
I like I said, we have that one card where we can borrow a lot of money. We could borrow a lot of money. We could have all the shiny new vehicles. We're borrowing money to pave our roads for the first time ever. You know, there's talk of building a new school department. But you know, think about it for a second in practical matters. If you had $240,000 on your credit cards and now you got a $500,000 home mortgage, there's going to be a point in time, you know, wherever money you're making, it's not going to be high enough to pay the minimum amounts. You know, and that's what's going to happen in Warwick. And I, you know, I've already heard from a lot of people. A good friend, his name was John Kennedy. He moved down south. People are leaving, right? Thank God. You know, we might only have one state, a United States rep soon, right? You know, so we're.
Yeah. It's if it's pretty rare that I don't have much to say. I feel like I just got hit by an avalanche. And yet the same stupid tricks are being played.
Yeah, it is.
Late night meetings,
It's sad.
last minute meetings, pushing through. You even got, I'm not going to name names here, you even got the specter of a young progressive councilman running for office, running for council,
Yeah.
who was celebrating the social justice of firemen being able to know that they have peace of mind, that somehow they're going to.
And this is the young kid who's running against the council president, Ward 9, and publicly sent out a press release criticizing the council president for wanting to do his homework and finding out the facts. I hope people in Ward 9 appreciate, you know, what's happening, because I think, you know, Councilman Marola is going to be targeted by the unions, and we don't need somebody like this. You know, right now the unions are beating us. They've won every step of the way.
Right.
They've got these contracts. They got clauses and stuff like that you know are going to destroy us. And you know, to the young you know, union members, firefighters, police officers, and whatever, if you really think, you know, you're 20-something years old and you're going to get these benefits when you're 50-something, I think they're crazy. You know, it's not going to happen.
Well, and here's a travesty. I mean, I have a 24-year-old and 22-year-old daughter. We are literally bankrupting them.
Yeah, we are.
Because if you're in your 50s now, in your 60s, and you take one of these, you know, sweetheart deals where you're able to retire like no one else on the planet now.
Yeah.
I hearkened back a few years ago to when the statewide teacher pension system was being reformed. And you had one of the teacher union leaders come on the air on WPRO and talk to, you know, the uncertainty of management, the difficulty in understanding where they're going to be financially in a few years, additional workloads. And I called in, I had to, and I said, welcome to planet Earth. It's my contention when I look at this globally, and then what I mean by that across the state of Rhode Island. You know, there's often talk, one of the big cliches is the 1%. To me, the true 1% in this state are the highly compensated municipal and state officials. Now by that, as I always use the analogy, I don't mean the guy or gal who's washing dishes in Zambrano. I don't mean the guy or gal who's doing, literally out there with a snow broom, cleaning, going down to Cohasset and making sure that the public paths are passable. I don't mean that.
Yeah.
Because very often what's happened is someone like yourself will come through and bombard people with all the information they could ever need, and you're looking to fix income people and put them on the street. It's not that. We've created a society in the state where this 1% exists, where there's no consideration given whatever to their annual salaries. Routine 6-figure plus salaries. I always say, I bet you they'd have taken it for 80 grand.
Yeah, well, the other thing you got to look at too. Why don't we look at, when I look at government, I look at Warwick government. It's a 7-hour workday, I believe. I think it's only a 35-hour work week. And the number of paid holidays, it's nothing. We talk about, people always say, well, in municipal government, you get paid less than it's switched now because the benefits, like you said earlier, before that, we gave the benefits to compensate for the reduction in the wages now. When you look at the wages right now, the wages are just as high or probably even higher than what people in private industry are making.
Oh, in real dollars, absolutely.
Well, because you know what you should do? Because when you look at the actual hours that you have to work, I have to work, I'm a salary employee. It's a 40-hour work week, but you spend a lot more time than that. But the thing is, and then when you look at, look at some of the holidays. You ever look at the holidays? For God's sake, it's like Grasshopper Day and you got the day off. You know what I'm saying?
I'm in sales, and it's no secret. I sell big trucks. And it's funny, we just got our holiday schedule, and sales is open. I believe the only actual holidays I have next year are Easter and Christmas.
Wow.
Did you hear me mention Memorial Day? No, you didn't. Did you hear me mention 4th of July? No, you did not. Now, I can take vacation time. But here, what you've got, again, you've got this creation of this artificial lifestyle here in the state. How many times have you heard, I'm going to wail on for about a minute here. How many times have you heard, with folks like you or I, that we're the nattering nabobs of negativity.
I know, yes, I hear that.
Look at what Rhode Island has to offer. Go to dinner at Federal Hill, spend the day down at Cold Snake Park, or go out down to South County and enjoy our beautiful beaches after having clams at the Matunic Oyster House. All of these wonderful things. The reality is that those are wonderful things, and there are wonderful people who have those businesses that promote those things. But the reality is, I'll tell you a quick story. I was filling in a WPRO, and it was a Friday, and I said, "Okay, folks, come on, let's after a particularly brutal Rhode Island day, where the working staff, the ham and egger guys like you and I, just gotten throttled again. Let's have some fun for the last half hour of the show. Let's talk about what are you going to do for Saturday night? It's Saturday night. I think I even had to play Elton John's. Saturday night's all right, folks. What are you going to do?" It's the first person called in. I'll never forget this. He goes, "My son just got me for my birthday a Netflix subscription." All right, that's what I can afford to do. I said, "Hey, grab something to eat. I can't afford it. Can't afford it. Go down to put your toes in the sand out in Little Compton. You can't afford it." The reality is that there's a significant number of people who have been left behind in the state by this ever-growing machine called government who absorbs all our resources. And here's the kicker. The schools perform terribly. We were treated today, and we've only got a couple minutes left, but we were treated today to the story. I believe it was a gentleman in Warwick who went out and was it Warwick or
He
Grant?
fixed a home pothole, yeah.
Yeah, he fixes his own potholes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's super. And now we're going to get into a defecation match between whether it's a municipal street or not. All right. You've got anecdotal and real world tales where they're not delivering at any level.
But you know what you're going to look at too. Why don't we look at that war veteran and what he's kind of have to go through because his taxes. This poor guy should be living out the rest of his life in comfort in his own home if he wants to, right? And his taxes are going up by $600 this year, and they're going to probably go up next year. And this poor guy's in tears. We're going to force him out of his house. The kids, at substandard schools. Right? That's the thing that we're talking about. We're not talking about, ripping everything out from anybody. We're talking about having sustainable government where we're fair to our employees, we give them good equipment, we give them good benefits, but you know what? We're not doing excess. And we have so much excess right now that we can't afford. and it's hurting the seniors, and it's hurting the kids. And like you said, you know what? Our grandchildren are gonna, and this is not only a Warwick level, it's a Rhode Island level, it's a national level,
Right.
you know, and no one wants to look at that. And we're the bad guys because we want to talk about it. But you know what? When push comes to shove, people who have the means to get up and go, what's happening in New York now, they say in California, right? You know, Warwick continues doing what it's doing. Why is Warwick losing all its population of kids? Right? The education system is one of the most important things about a municipality, right?
terms
It
of real
brings
estate values.
people in. Why is Warwick, you know, I think South County, I mean, I know someone who went down to Charlestown and they say the property taxes are so much less. I mean, that's maybe what the best of the worst. I mean, Rhode Island's just terrible all the way around, it seems
Right.
like that. But you know, unless we get people that want to come in and fix things, and I hate to say it, I don't see it happening. I really don't. You know, there's not too many more times that I need the state police to be calling me at my house because I made a crazy off-cuff comment on when I was live streaming that I'm going to get up there and kill them in reference to the finance committee, and I have the union treasurer from the Warwick Fire Department sending out an email to the Warwick Beacon saying that I have 2 people that are plotting to murder me. This really happened.
Right.
You know? And then 5 years ago, they call my employer and they try to get me fired. Like, I don't need this anymore. I just see the train wreck coming. I hope people want to make some changes. And I think the only way to do it is people need to step up to the plate that really care about the city and have the fortitude to talk about this stuff and run on a platform. Maybe you don't run individually. You know, maybe we need to get 5 Republicans together, one for each one of those wards, on a platform to say this is what we're going after, and we're going after those 5 council people. Maybe that would do it. I don't know.
To be continued.
Yeah, we'll see.
I'd love to make you a regular part of the show. Feel free as these issues arise. You and a handful of other people, and I guess I always call him the captain, but you, the captain, Ken Block, and to all of your eternal credit, continue to just throw yourself on the flames.
Yeah, well, you know, you try to be respectful with it. You know, sometimes everybody's human. Everybody makes mistakes and things like that. But, you know, you try to keep it about the topics and things like that. It does get emotional. You know, if someone's coming over to me and say, Bob, you know what, we're going to change your working condition to make you work 60 hours. Yeah, I would be kind of crying too. But, you know, I would just hope people could kind of take a step back and look at the excesses of what we have built in. Can we at least agree on that?
We are sadly we are so far beyond that. The word that comes to mind that's most missing from the government ecosphere here in Rhode Island is perspective.
Yeah.
There is a significant part of the state employee, and again, I'm talking about those highly compensated individuals, you know, and those folks who have unfettered access to overtime, and the folks that have these incredible benefits. And they are absolutely lacking.
The problem is we're electing people like DeVella Wilkinsons who just totally have people bamboozled, who puts together, she knows what the situation is in Warwick, she's from Warwick, and she puts legislation that totally, you know, undermines, you know, what's going on to try to make change. And guess who's the only mayor who didn't show up on the press conference and join the lawsuit to try to fight it? Our mayor, Solomon. You know?
No show Solomon.
I don't know. I want the aliens to beam back the Joe that I used to know on the council, you know, because this isn't the same Joe that I respected that was going to go in there and make some reforms and make some tough decisions. It's too bad because, you know, that's the kind of guy we need.
Absolutely. Well, again, congratulations on your efforts. Enjoyable would be the wrong word for tonight. Informative with a dash of entertaining, but at the same time, a reality check that folks desperately need. You know, I want you to come back again soon, just kind of update us and really continue to bring the human light to it, because ultimately it's the ham and eggers of the world, as we like to call them, the regular folks,
you know,
get lost in this.
I tell you one thing, I would love to bring some of these people in that talk to me that I don't even know who they are, these elderly people who are coming in and tell their real life stories of how, you know, the way the city's being governed, whether it's the children who aren't getting their sports program or the school, they're not getting their books or whatever, or it's the elderly person who is just struggling to stay alive in his own home, you know?
Again,
all right,
great stuff, buddy.
Thank you.
Bob Cushman, now where can we find you on the web? You've got a Facebook group.
I have. It's called the Taxpayer Spin. I used to write a column in the Warwick Beacon called the Taxpayer Spin. Unfortunately, Mayor Avedisian didn't like it, and after 3 years, I got kind of basically fired by John Hall because
You're welcome to write it here.
Okay.
No, I'll put that out to you. I would love to have you submit something at your leisure, when you're not working up, in your own difficult, challenging career.
In Woonsocket.
Woonsocket.
Yeah.
I'll put that invitation out to you because, again, you've got. Next time we'll talk about the media, so they can find you there, and of course they can reach you on the Facebook.
Yeah, they can reach me on that Facebook page, and there's multiple ways, I guess, to get in touch with people. My email address is Cushman@cox.net. Cushman@cox.net.
Easy enough. Bob Cushman, he's an activist, a slayer of dragons. What's that song? We Need a Hero. We need about 20 more Bob Cushman spread out throughout a variety of communities. Folks once said that government is supposed to be to help, in a sense, people's lives, and I'm a libertarian. I'm not that optimistic, but it's not supposed to be for people to get one. You continue to bring light to some of the and I'll leave with this thought. It's so easy to get lost in the morass of municipal finance, the buzzwords, the acronyms, the laws, the financial calculations. We need people who are able to take that and make it accessible. And if you and your unholy trio there have done nothing else, you've made it highly accessible for the rest of us regular folks who are trying to understand it while getting through the noise of our daily lives. So God bless, lad.
Okay.
We're going to take a quick break right now. Charles Perallo, a national libertarian activist, is going to be joining us in just a couple minutes. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_. Of course, the mothership is coalitionradio.us. A big thanks to Beacon Shipping and Logistics. They sponsored this segment. They're from Warwick. Who knew? International automobile shipping right at your disposal. They can go anywhere in the world, anywhere in the country, even anywhere in Rhode Island. And they're right here in Warwick, Rhode Island. Folks, stay tuned. We'll be right back.